And today I'd like us to reflect on the subject, the meaning of life. I want us to try and see if we can get meaning out of life and to define life. And we will be looking at majorly the book of Ecclesiastes. I believe our first reading has been read to us, Ecclesiastes chapter 12 from verse 8 to 14. But it is good that we look at the book of Ecclesiastes in its entirety so that we can understand it better. And we can get the message in its correct context. So the word Ecclesiastes, it literally means someone who gathers people, somebody who assembles people for the purpose of teaching them, for the purpose of learning. So basically the word Ecclesiastes is can mean a teacher or a preacher. And from the first verse of this book, we can then say that this is a teacher or a preacher, but most importantly, it is a son of David. So he comes from that lineage, king of Jerusalem. And common belief suggests that the book of Ecclesiastes was written by King Solomon. So when King Solomon is writing the book of Ecclesiastes, he writes it in a very confusing way. Because one, he is writing it in his old age. And he is also writing this book as an argument. This is a debate. Basically, the book of Ecclesiastes is an argumentative essay. It is like a debate. Now, for those of us who are in primary school, we did debates. Mother is better than father. Bwana asifiwe. We all remember those debates. So we did mother is better than father. Then you come, you say, I propose mother is better than father. Because number one, mother cooks, mother cleans, mother takes care of the children. And then the other side comes and says, father is better because father does A, B, C, D. And then after they are done, you come and then you give counter arguments. You say, mother does this, but father does not do this. So that is how the book of Ecclesiastes is. It is a debate, and the debate is the meaning of life. However, when King Solomon is writing and giving his arguments, from the start of the book, we do not know his side of the argument. That is why if you take just any verse from the book of Ecclesiastes, it is very easy to be confused on what he is saying or what he is trying to mean. Instead, he starts the book with just giving arguments, and then later on in chapter 12 at the end is when he says the meaning of life or whatever he is trying to argue, his side of the argument. So one thing that we know, King Solomon is writing this book in his old age. He is meditating and rethinking his life. And he is seeing all the things that he has done in this life. And the opening lines of this book in verse 2 of chapter 1, he says, vanity of vanities. Now, the Hebrew language does not have adjectives. Adjectives, they describe, you cannot say in the Hebrew language, the most. So whenever you see something described in two, like vanity of vanities, he is simply meaning this is the most of all. That is why you also see in the Bible, Song of Songs, the greatest songs, Lord of Lords, the greatest. So when Solomon is saying vanity of vanities, the first thing that he is saying, that his understanding of life from the start, it is the most useless thing of all useless things. In fact, the Hebrew translation of it is hevel. And hevel, it means vapor, smoke, or it can also mean wind. It is something you can see, but you cannot touch. So when he's saying vanity of vanities, other versions say meaningless. He is saying that of all the things he has seen on this earth, life is the most useless things of all things. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. So that is the first thing that we have to understand as we go through the book of Ecclesiastes to understand the meaning of life. Vanity of vanity. Meaningless. It is vapor. It is smoke. It is wind. Meaning we can only see it, but we cannot touch it. So there are three key terms that we need to note down if we are to understand Ecclesiastes. The first one is that vanity of vanities. the most useless of useless things. Number 2 is the term under the sun. King Solomon uses this term to describe how he sees life. Under the sun simply means the view of life from the perspective of the earth. How he sees life on earth. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. And the third term is under the heavens. He uses this term to describe life from God's perspective. So there are 2 ways that he views life. The first one is under the sun, the earthly perspective, the perspective that is without God. And the second perspective is under the heavens, the perspective that is guided by God. There is God in the equation. And as we go through the book of Ecclesiastes, we will note that when he talks about life under the sun and life under the heavens, there is a distinct difference. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. So as we read, before now we start to see how he argues life. Another caution, as you read the book of Ecclesiastes, it is also important to note that this book is part of the wisdom literature. Meaning, it is the philosophy of King Solomon. It is his opinion. And his opinion can be limited because he was human. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. So whatever he says, we can question it, but there is a point why God allowed it to be in the Bible, so that we can learn from it. If we read wisdom as the law and apply it, we will miss the point. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. The laws in the Bible are very clear. Children, obey your parents. It is direct. But as you read the book of Ecclesiastes, this is a wisdom literature book. So whatever sometimes he says, it means deeper than what meets the eye. There are verses he is saying, drink wine and make merry. If we take that verse and we run with it, we will miss the point of whatever he's trying to say. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. So, caution, the book of Ecclesiastes is a wisdom book. And with wisdom, you ought to treat it different from the books of the law. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. So let us now first see how King Solomon tries to define life. And he goes through over very many things, but in summary, there are 3 ways that he tries to define life that I have categorized for us to understand better. And the first way that King Solomon tries to define life is using wisdom and knowledge. He tries to make meaning out of life through wisdom and knowledge. Now, knowledge is the accumulation of information and facts, while wisdom relates to applying that knowledge to make sound judgment. As humans, these are familiar terms to us, wisdom and knowledge. Knowledge is the reading that we do. We go to school, we go and get education. We research, we search for information, we Google. That is, we are pursuing knowledge. Wisdom is now applying that to our lives. The decisions that you make based on that information that you have and you have collected over time. And that is the first way that King Solomon tries to define life. And as we know, we say as wise as Solomon. This was the wisest man. He was granted wisdom by God. And he himself, he pursued the study. He studied different subjects. He studied philosophy to gain wisdom. But when he comes to the book of Ecclesiastes and he tells us that he has understood over time that at his old age, after reflecting about his life, his pursuit of knowledge and wisdom, he finds it useless. Now, we should be very careful when a wise man tells us that, because he is wise, so he knows what it feels like to have wisdom. Meaning, he is not saying it from a point of jealousy, that he has never obtained wisdom. So he's jealous, so he's saying wisdom is useless. No, this is a man who had wisdom. And he's telling us that at the end of it all, wisdom and knowledge is useless. In fact, he says that wisdom will reveal the complexities of this earth, but there are some things that will remain hidden. Regardless of how wise you are, there are things in life you cannot understand. He goes ahead and says that the more wisdom you have, the more problems you have on yourself. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Isn't that true if we compare it to our lives? That the more we know, the more problems we invite to ourselves. Have you ever been sick and you Googled your symptoms on Google to understand what you are suffering from? And by Googling, sometimes your simple problem can be escalated to something more, simply because you have that information that if I feel this way, this might be something like this. But if you didn't know, it wouldn't stress you. So he says, the more you know, the more problems you invite. And by trying to understand life through wisdom and knowledge, King Solomon exposes the limits of knowledge and wisdom. The more we have known in this generation, the more problems we have. We have tried to understand life, and we even come up with theories. We try to remove God from the equation sometimes to describe how we came to this earth. We have the evolution theory. How we came from a monkey, you developed Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens. But if you understand that theory and you come to think of it, why aren't the monkeys right now evolving? So it is just us trying to understand some things, but some things were hidden from man. So regardless of how much you want to know and question, there are limits to wisdom and knowledge. There are things that you cannot, like I'm sure we have heard of this song. Who told the sun where to stand? Who told the moon where to hide till the evening? These are the mysteries of life that wisdom and knowledge cannot understand. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. So, regardless of how much we want to learn, we are inviting more problems to ourselves in our pursuit to be wise. There are no limits to education. Even the most educated professor, they say professors, they know so much about very little. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Because the more you go higher, gaining more education, you go specializing. Even doctors, you start as a general doctor. When you want to specialize, you go to different branches of medicine. By the time you are done with one branch, you are too old to learn anything once more. And so by the end of it all, when King Solomon sees that he has studied all the subjects that he ought to study, his conclusion about defining life through wisdom and knowledge is that it is all meaningless. So his pursuit of wisdom and knowledge could not please him and could not satisfy him. The more he learned, the more he wanted to know more. And the more you know more, you realize that you still don't know more. So it is a constant loop. And regardless of how much you know, there are things that are hidden from the human. We cannot understand it. That is the sad thing about life under the sun. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. The second way that King Solomon tries to understand life, he uses pleasure to make meaning out of life. Pleasure. Pleasure relates to the delights in life. Whenever you tell a Christian something about pleasure, we only think about the pleasure in the world. We forget that we also as Christians, we have our own pleasure. Pleasure, it relates to the delights in life. Food, drinks, song, dance, owning property, having a nice car, wearing nice clothes. Those are pleasures. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. We want to have beautiful houses. That is pleasure. Those are the pleasures that King Solomon tried. In fact, in chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes, he said, "Then I said to my heart, I will test you with pleasure." And so he goes ahead and says in that chapter that everything his eyes could see, he did not deny himself. He tried wine. He tried food. He tried women. How many wives and concubines did King Solomon have? Bwana Yesu asifiwe. He made beautiful gardens for himself. But at the end of it, when he was sitting down and reflecting, he told himself that even all this pleasure that I am pursuing, it is all meaningless. It is useless. It did not satisfy him. And that is the tragedy of pleasure. At first, pleasure is enticing and we want to enjoy it. You've discovered it. It is sweet. then you experience it. After you experience it, you enjoy it, and then you want it again. Then you experience it, and the more you experience it, you love it to a point you come and hate it. And you no longer want it. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. That is how human beings are. And that is the tragedy of life under the sun. There is no satisfaction that comes with pleasure. The more we have, the more we want. I believe all of us were kids. Bwana asifiwe. Hakuna mtu alizaliwa kama amesha grow, si ndio? Sisi wote tulizaliwa tukaanzia tukiwa watoto. Kuna time maziwa peke yake ya mama ndio ilikuwa ndio chakula, and it was very sweet. But then you got to a point, hiyo sasa ibambi, ukatafuta ingine, tukakula malenge na ikatubamba at that time. Saa hizi nachukia malenge, siwezi kula. But there is a time that is what I used to enjoy. And that is what happens with pleasure. Whatever King Solomon was enjoying, he tried everything. He tried wine. He even hired singers to come to his courts. At the end of it all, when he's writing Ecclesiastes in his old age and reflecting about life, he says, this is meaningless. It had no use. So whatever we are enjoying right now, and we think that this is the epitome of life, this is the climax, a time is coming, we will not enjoy it. In fact, we will say it is useless. Saa hizi mimi napenda nyama sana. But I know there is a time, an age is coming, I will not have the teeth to enjoy that meat. The closest I will be to eating that meat that I enjoy today, nakuwa tunakunywa soup. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. So if I define my life according to that pleasure that I have, that my life is centered on nyama, kuna time sitaweza kula. So will that mean that is the end of my life? Bwana asifiwe. So if you try to define life out of pleasure, the things that you enjoy, some of us it is songs and entertainment. But songs inatokea every now and then. Trends are coming up. Syllabus inasonga mbio sana. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. So this is what was happening. The things that we're experiencing now, they are not new to us. King Solomon experienced it, and he experienced it more than we did because he had it all. He was better placed to enjoy it. So again, when he's telling us that he has understood pleasure to be meaningless, he's not saying it from a point of jealousy, but a point of having experienced it. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. So pleasure did not satisfy him. At first, he tried wisdom and knowledge and understood this is meaningless. He went ahead and told himself, let me try pleasure. It did not satisfy him. He tried women. He had it all, but it did not satisfy him. In our lives, if we reflect up to that point, we can draw very many parallels. The pleasures that we enjoy. If you are into fashion, wakati unataka hii, fashion ingine imetokea. So this one will no longer satisfy you. You'll want another one. If you are into relationships and women, wanaume Bwana asifiwe. Wakati umepata tu girlfriend hivi, sasa hizo ndio unaona the love of your life. Bwana asifiwe. So meaning, if that is how you want to define your life, you'll never get a real definition. The things will keep on changing and changing and changing. Bwana asifiwe. The third thing that he tries to use to define his life is labor and accumulation of riches. By labor, I mean work. Bwana asifiwe. So King Solomon, he has a very bad attitude, particularly about working hard. He says he cannot understand why we toil so much, and yet all that we are working for, we will leave it on this earth for others to enjoy. Bwana asifiwe. The more you work hard, you work so hard, and you accumulate wealth. But unfortunately, that wealth that you're working so hard for, you will leave it here on earth for others to enjoy it, who are not there when you are working hard for it, others to enjoy, who even don't appreciate it. And so he says, toiling so much is also meaningless. It is useless. His pursuit for labor and working hard did not give meaning to life. In fact, he says even the riches that he had, he comes to understand that all this is meaningless because money does not give satisfaction. The more money you have, the more money you want. It is there in the Bible. Bwana asifiwe. In fact, he says, being rich is inviting more problems to yourself. In Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 12, he says, sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the wealth of the rich man does not allow him to sleep. Bwana asifiwe. So, in your days that you did not have much, you had sleep. There is nothing you have to protect. Bwana asifiwe. Whether you eat or you don't, or you will sleep. But the more riches you have, the more stress you have because you want to protect that you have and create more. So when he tries to understand life in terms of wealth and working so hard, he does not get meaning because he's in a constant cycle of wanting to get more and more and more and more. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Isn't this the way some of us have defined our lives? Bwana asifiwe. Our lives are centered on our careers. I even hear these days we have fancy names for it. Tuko na corporate buddies. Corporate buddies in the house. Bwana asifiwe. Si kwa ubaya. Kama we ni corporate buddy, jikubali tu. Si kwa ubaya na ni baraka pia, si ndio? But being so much invested in that corporate body, at the end of it all, Ecclesiastes is telling us it is meaningless. It cannot give meaning to life. Regardless of how high you go the career ladder, you can go beyond that ladder, but you will not get meaning. The higher you go, the higher you want to go. So you cannot get the meaning out of life. The more wealth you have, the more you will want. I remember in campus, one of our lecturers, he was teaching us about public finance. And one day he saw in the news about corruption. And when he came in the next class, he was telling us, I know I am teaching some of you here. And very soon when I'll be watching the news, I'll see some of you involved in corruption. Then he asked, why do you want so much money? What do you want so much money for? Why still all those millions and billions? What is it for? And then as students in our naivety, we said, you are creating wealth for your generations so that your children and your grandchildren can have a lot of money. And then he told us, no, you don't need a lot of money. And he told us his philosophy, I only need money for today and maybe tomorrow. For my children, I will leave them something small. But most importantly, I will leave them with God. So that the same God who gave me can also give them. Because if I give them too much, and I have not given them the principles of life and God, they will not have it. And that perspective really challenged me. And I was also going through, those words came back to me because at times we want to create a lot of wealth, thinking that we are creating a secure future for our generation. But that same generation that we are working for, Hao wenyewe wakiulizwa wanasemaje? Hiyo generation inakam. Maybe they are not interested in all that we are doing. In fact, they will abuse it. Look at the life of King Solomon. Those who inherited him, they squandered it and brought down Israel. Read about the life of Rehoboam, the succeeding kings. So, King Solomon, in his old age, I want to assume, when I was reading Ecclesiastes, I was creating that picture that he was under a tree talking to some young people in his old age, and he is telling himself, when I tried to define life according to the way I work hard, my career, my position, and the riches, I still didn't find meaning. Because I have seen my fellow rich men, they die and they leave their riches here on earth. Bwana asifiwe. Why does the preacher think life is useless? That is King Solomon. He is the preacher in this case. I said Ecclesiastes means somebody who gathers people. Yeah, the word in Hebrew is koheleth. So it is translated maybe to a teacher or a preacher. So when I mention the teacher or a preacher, I am referring to King Solomon. Why does he think life is useless? Three reasons why he thinks life is useless. Number one, nothing is new on earth. He thinks that everything in this world has been there. In fact, he says, whatever has been will be again. So, life is useless because the cycles are the same. New people are born today, others die. The sun will rise today, and we are sure it will set again. The rain will come, and it will go again. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Everything in this earth is just the same. The days are just the same. Regardless of how we name it, Monday, Tuesday, that is our human understanding, trying to make meaning of the days. But the same days that you are having today were the same days that were there. No one can do anything on this earth and claim that it is the new thing. It has been done for the first time. Everything that has been will be again. And whatever is there was there before. So, with that in mind, the preacher thinks life is useless. He cannot find meaning out of it. The second reason why he thinks life is useless, times and seasons are not in the hands of man, but of God. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. If you read Ecclesiastes chapter 3, it describes the seasons very well. And that is perhaps the most quoted portion of Ecclesiastes. It describes the times and seasons. A time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to be happy, a time to be sad. And at the end he says, it is very poetic. I recommend that you read it. He says that all these times and seasons, however much they change, it is not upon us as humans. They are not in our hands, but they are in the hands of God. However, as humans, we have used this portion of scripture in our problems only. When you are down, you remind yourself, mambo yatabadilika, times and seasons will change. How I wish we also use it to remind ourselves that when you are happy and enjoying the highs of life, that too will change. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Happiness is not always. It will change. A mythical story is told of King Solomon that one day he told his servant that I want you to go and get me a ring. And this ring, I want, when I look at it, when I am happy, I become sad. And when I am sad, if I look at that ring, it should make me happy. So that servant really wondered, what kind of ring is this? And he went to all the ring makers, the best in town, to get this ring. And they could not understand what this ring means. What kind of ring that if you are happy and you look at it, it makes you sad. And if you are sad, if you look at it, it makes you happy. So after much thought, the servant came across an old man who was a ring maker. And he told him, I want a ring that when the king looks at it, when he's happy, he becomes sad. And if he's sad, if he looks at it, it makes him happy. So that old man took a random ring and wrote some words around it. And he gave it to him and he told him, take it to the king. And he wondered, are you sure? Yes. So the servant took the ring to the king. And immediately the king saw that ring. He said, this is the ring I wanted. The words that were written on this ring were the following words. These two shall pass. Bwana asifiwe. So when he is happy and he looks at that ring, it tells him, these two shall pass. And when he is sad and he looks at that ring, it tells him, these two shall pass. How I wish we also adopt that philosophy. It simply describes that no season is permanent. When you are happy, do not be drowned in your happiness to forget that these two shall pass. And when you are sad, do not be drowned in those miseries, but remind yourself that these two shall pass. Because the times and seasons were already dictated by God, and we know them. They are not in our hands. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. So that is the second reason why he thinks life is useless. If I was the one to dictate time and season, if I was the one to dictate when I want to be happy, if I was the one to dictate when I want the tragedies of life to come to me, then life will have a meaning. But because I am not the one who dictates the times and seasons, life has no meaning under the sun. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. The third and last reason why King Solomon thinks life is useless is because there is a common fate for all of us. Bwana asifiwe. When he is describing the wise and the foolish, the rich and the poor, he says that all of them are overtaken by the same fate. In fact, in chapter 9, if you read chapter 9, verse 11 to 12, he says, and perhaps we have used this phrase, the race is not for the battle is not for the swift. So it doesn't mean if you are rich, you will suffer a different fate from the poor. If you are wise, you will suffer the same problems as the foolish ones. Bwana asifiwe. So because of that fate, common fate, life is useless. There is a common fate for all of us. And the greatest thing that equalizes us, according to him, that he finds, we have a common destiny, and that common destiny is death. We will all die. Bwana asifiwe. It is very scary to tell a Christian that we will die, but we want to go to heaven. How will we get there? Bwana asifiwe. So, death is a guarantee. In fact, King Solomon says in chapter 7, verse 2, that death is a guarantee. So the living should take that to heart. That simply means that in our lives, as we live, let us live like people who will die. Some of us live like we will be here forever. Like we have all the time, but there is a common destiny. Whether educated, whether uneducated, whether rich, whether poor, whether you have all the material things, regardless of how much you enjoy life, there is a common destiny for us all, death. And so because of those three things, the preacher cannot find meaning out of life, and he is very frustrated. Throughout, when he's reading Ecclesiastes, most of the part, he is describing life under the sun. And when he tests all these things, he cannot find meaning out of life. Bwana asifiwe. So what does the preacher really mean? What is the point? Should we not enjoy these things? Are riches bad? Is pleasure bad? Is gaining wisdom and knowledge bad? That is not the point of the preacher. That is why I said we should be very careful when reading the book of Ecclesiastes and picking the verses. That is not his point. In fact, he says in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 12 to 13, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. So do not misquote or misunderstand the preacher. He is not saying these things are bad. He understands the importance. Whenever he's saying that wisdom is useless, he also acknowledges the importance of wisdom. He says when you are foolish, you are destroying yourself. If you do not pursue knowledge, you are destroying yourself. Bwana asifiwe. When he's talking about pleasure, he is saying that pleasure is the gift from God. In fact, there's a point he's saying, go and do it. God has already approved of it. So pleasure, the things that you enjoy, the things that you own, they are also a gift from God. His point is not that these things are bad. He says he does not find meaning out of it, but he's not saying that these things are bad. When he's talking about working hard and accumulating wealth and riches, it is not his point. Riches are a gift from God. Later on, earlier on when he was writing in Proverbs, he was saying, the blessing of the Lord maketh one rich, and he adds no sorrow to it. Bwana asifiwe. So these things that he is not finding meaning out of life, he is not saying that these things are bad. And that is the misery that some Christians have, and misunderstanding that some Christians have had. We have misunderstood it, and some of us think denying ourselves. There is something called asceticism. When you think that I am denying myself, I am withdrawing, I will not wear nice clothes, I will not eat certain food in a particular way because those are things of the world. No. God ordained these things to be here for our use here. Bwana asifiwe. They are to be enjoyed here. The main point of the preacher, although he acknowledges the importance of these things in life, and he cannot find meaning, his main point is that these things, we should not idolize them. That is his main point. Life becomes meaningless when we idolize these things. If your career and your pursuit for wealth has taken center stage of your life, then life is meaningless because that career is temporary. Bwana asifiwe. That is the point of the preacher. And as he comes to the end of his debating, the preacher now shifts from talking about life under the sun to talking life under the heavens. We said life under the sun is simply the perspective of life without God from the earthly perspective. That is life under the sun. Life under the heavens is life under the perspective of God. When he is talking about life under the sun, he is very depressed and very sad and very bitter about life because all the things that rule life under the sun, they are meaningless. Vanity of vanity. It is like chasing after the wind. But when he starts talking about life under the heavens, he is optimistic. There is hope for a future. Bwana asifiwe. When he brings God to the equation of life, there is hope. And in chapter 12, we have read from verse 8 to 14. If you start reading from verse 10, he comes to the end of his argument. And it is very important that you get this end. of the argument to understand the book of Ecclesiastes. After he has debated and gone through life under the sun and gone through all that dissatisfaction, he says, allow me to read. Not only was the teacher wise, but he also imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was right and true. The words of the wise are like gods, their collected sayings like firmly embedded nails given by one shepherd. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition of them. Of making many books, there is no end. That is the limit of wisdom he is talking about. Of making many books, there is no end. And much study, where is the body? Now, the end, from verse 13. Now, all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. Up to that point, the preacher is telling us, out of everything that I have done and out of all this reflection I've had, the point of life, fear God and keep his commandments. That is the duty of mankind. That is the meaning of life. The meaning of our lives is not found in pursuing wisdom, knowledge, riches, pleasure, working so hard. The meaning of life, our duty as mankind, fear God and keep his commandments. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Bwana asifiwe. In the end, the preacher is telling us that our life is a gift from God. The life that we are given by God is a gift. And this gift that we are given with one single duty, fearing God and keeping his commandments. That is what we are sent with. But because we are placed right here under the sun, there are other things that God has given out as bonus. For our survival down here, we will need wisdom and knowledge. We will need some wealth. We will need it. What was our primary role when he was giving us life? To fear him and keep his commandments. These things that we have found here under the sun, they are temporary. So when we come to the earth and replace our primary obligation with these temporary things, now life becomes meaningless. Bwana asifiwe. But if we understand the meaning of life, that it is to fear God and keep his commandments, and you come to the earth and still interact with these other things, you work hard, you pursue your career ambitions and aim to grow the career ladder, but in a manner that fears God, then you will not need to bribe your way to get a job. If you are a corporate body, you will not need to sleep with so and so that you can get so and so position. Because if you do that, you have abandoned your primary role and replaced it with something that is vapor. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. If you come to this earth with that mindset that God has sent you to fear him and keep his commandments, then your wealth and riches will glorify him. Bwana asifiwe. Your pursuit of wisdom and knowledge will edify the body of Christ. And it will help you to grow in Christ. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. Life in itself, as King Solomon describes it, has no meaning. Everything that we do has no meaning. Life gained its meaning through the grace of God, as we have read in Romans chapter 3 verse 24. That is the theme of our church this year. Understanding the impact of God's grace. one of the very many impacts of this grace is that the grace of God came to give our lives meaning. Because life in itself is useless. So unless God allows that grace to rest upon us, then life in itself has no meaning. And now simply because we have been gifted this grace of God and we have been gifted this life, our lives should be centered on fearing and keeping his commandments. Bwana asifiwe. Because the preacher is telling us every good deed will be brought to judgment. God is the auditor. Those who do accounts, auditors. I'm sure we have also heard of auditors. Gen Z tuna watch news sana. And we have seen in the Senate, the Public Accounts Committee, how governors go there and you are told you are given so and so much money. This is how you have used it. That is the same thing that this verse is telling us. You see the way we frown when we see a governor, we hear a governor has spent 4 million on tea. Chai, 4 million. And we are very mad. That is the same way God will be very mad at us when he's auditing our lives and said, I gave you so and so years. Half of your years you spent on pleasure that did not bring glory to me. Half of your years was spent on working so hard for riches that you left on earth, and in no way did they please me. So the same way we want to hold our leaders to high standards when it comes to matters of how they spend our resources, can we hold ourselves to those very high standards when we are evaluating the resources God has given us? This life we have, it is not deserved. I am not sure about who we will be or how many will be left here tomorrow. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. And so this life is a gift. And because it is a gift, let us live to please the one who gave us this gift. Because the Bible is telling us here in Ecclesiastes, all that we do is meaningless unless God is in the equation. Bwana Yesu asifiwe. King Solomon says, remember God in your youth and serve him. Because a time is coming, just like King Solomon, you will be seated under a tree. You are reflecting about your life. And you will realize all the pleasures of this world, all the things that you chased after, it was like chasing after the wind. And you no longer find pleasure in them. When he says, remember God in your youth, it is not necessarily years. The fact that you are hearing this now, you still have time to reflect and to give your life to Christ, to fear him. Because through him, life will have a meaning. Remember, at the end of it all, there are only two options. With this life that we have, we will all stand one day, and the options will be two. They are already stated in the book of Matthew. The first option, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your master. And the second option will be, depart from me, I never knew you. I hope that whatever you do with your life will be something worth when you come to that judgment, and it will have meaning. God bless you.